Okay, well, it's 5:31 now. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And normally Jeff does this bit where he talks about our sponsors and our programs, but he's doing something else tonight, so I get to do it. And we are very grateful for our sponsors. We have Brex. Brex is a credit card that is kind to founders. It doesn't use any of your assets, and they give a bonus to founders that sign up. So instead of us getting the bonus, we're giving it back to the founders. So if you do decide that you want a Brex card, you'll get a $500 credit in your corporate card account. The city of Las Vegas is a great supporter of startups in the area, and AngelNV in particular. They're very kind to us. They allow us to use this space that we're in Las Vegas, and they usually find a way to give us the city council chambers for our finale event, which is the conclusion of the AngelNV. It'll be April 30th of next year. And Glassboard Technology provides us the way to create our special purpose vehicles for the AngelNV investments. So this is the process of a startup that every startup goes through as long as they get through it. The sweet spot for AngelNV, which is the part that we're in now, is in viability. So we have the accelerator, the Startup NV Accelerator, and that's for companies that have a product in the marketplace or are just about to, and that comes with a $50,000 investment, and our goal is to get you to the next level of financing. So usually you're in the program less than a year, and our goal is to get you to that next level of financing. Grow NV is for earlier stage, more in the idea. And if I move on to the next slide, it'll show that we have 3 programs for entrepreneurs and 3 programs for investors. So Grow NV is for the ideation, the pre-accelerator stage. Startup NV Accelerator, I just described to you. And AngelNV, this is kind of a special thing all on its own. We are teaching founders what angel investors want, and then we bring a group of new angel investors together, and they look at all of the companies that apply to AngelNV2, and they will go through a whittling down process. They'll look at all of the companies who apply in teams. Then they break it down into the companies that get presented from one team to the rest. And from there, we take votes and we decide on which companies we're going to be hearing a short pitch from. And then we whittle it down. Usually that's about 20 companies or so. And then we whittle it down again to those companies that we want to hear a 10-minute pitch from. And then our goal is to get to 6 companies. And we have the angels breaking into 6 teams, and they perform due diligence on each of those teams. So that's the real part of the learning for the angels when they're going through the due diligence process. And it's also a big learning curve for the founders if they haven't prepared for due diligence, because it gets them scrambling. But our goal with this presentation tonight and some of the ones that we've had in the past is to make you aware of what kind of documentation you need to have to satisfy those angels when they're going through the due diligence process. So on the fund side, we have Fund NV, and that's the vehicle that funds the companies that enter into the Startup NV Accelerator. Seed NV is a new fund that we are just about to start up, and that will be one that participates in the next round of financing for those Fund NV companies. And then AngelNV, as I said, is its own special little thing that we're doing. So as a result of that, Startup NV has been around since the summer of 2017. We've heard 696, almost 700 pitches. We've had 53 companies run through the accelerator. We have had 29 companies funded to the tune of $71.2 million. So it's a process, and it's gaining a little bit of steam now. So these are some of the companies that have been admitted into the accelerator recently. And let me see, Safe Harbor was the one that won the big prize last year in AngelNV1. Okay, it all starts with the pitch. If you're interested in pitching to us, you can go to our website, startupnv.org, and click on the I'm a founder, click on the pitch, And there's a process that you go through in order to be able to pitch. And after you pitch, you get one of these lovely little magic quadrants that shows your startup feasibility. And that's it. Okay, so Logan, I am going to turn it over to you to introduce Dr. Leith Martin.
All right, thanks, Patty. Can you hear me okay?
I do hear you fine.
Excellent. All right, everyone, thank you all for coming and those that are attending online. Today, we're going to be having Dr. Leith Martin, who's the Executive Director for the Troesh Center for Entrepreneurship at UNLV. A businessman. He's been in the entrepreneurship and business realm for several years, and has contributed pretty significantly to a lot of the startup ecosystem, startup developments here in Southern Nevada and elsewhere. So today, he's going to be addressing due diligence. When an investor approaches you, or you approach an investor and you start to engage, and there's a conversation about, are they going to invest in your company or your startup? What can you expect? How do you prepare for that? How do you get ready? As you may recall, we had Bill Sickliver talk about kind of the things that, the financial things that they're looking for, and those kind of other risk categories that the investors are looking at. Today, Leith is going to go over some of the processes, procedures, the documents, and those things that you need to get in order when you enter into a due diligence for potential investment from investors. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get the screen shared up here, and here's Dr. Leith Martin.
Thanks, Logan. Maggie, you got me good?
You sound great, and I want to remind all of our participants that if they have questions for you, they should put them into the chat, but you will be on your own for rustling the questions in the room.
Sounds great, and I'll repeat what if you don't hear from here, okay?
Wonderful. Yeah, repeating the question is always a great idea, and I know you're good at it.
So listen, before I start, obviously I'm here to talk about due diligence, but before I start, each one of you came here for a specific reason. And so I want to make sure that the reason you came, you leave with at least that reason answered, or that question answered. So before I even start my presentation, which is a lot of talking, why did each one of you come here? What do you want to know? When you leave for today, you got a random email that had my picture on it that said preparing for due diligence, and you thought, oh, I need to attend that. Why did you think you needed to attend that? Anything?
Well, I'm just entering into the due diligence phase with very interesting investment, and I want to make sure that
Okay, so she said that she's entering due diligence with a couple of interested investors and just wants to make sure she's prepared. All right, anybody else? Any particular reason anyone else came?
I'm familiar with due diligence,
Okay.
so basics.
You just wanted to learn more about due diligence itself. Okay, great. Anybody else? Due diligence in general?
Angel investor concept.
Okay. All right, cool. So let me tell you what I've actually prepared. So I've actually prepared a deck that I've used a couple times to work with angel investors in doing due diligence with their companies. Now, the reason I did it from their perspective is because if you understand what they're looking for and why they're looking for it, you're much more likely to not only understand why they're asking you the questions they're going to ask you, but more likely to be prepared to give them the information that they're actually looking for as opposed to what you think they're looking for, okay? So what I've done is this is a deck that I've actually prepared that I've given a couple times to angel investors, and we'll flip it backwards a couple times because some of you are on the other side when you're on the company side, okay? So what I'm doing wrong, buddy. I can just use the mouse. There we go. Cool. So just a brief, I guess I need to introduce myself. So my name is Leith Martin, and I run what's called the Troesh Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at UNLV. I have started, half a dozen companies, some more successful than others. Undergrad mechanical engineering. I got an MBA. I started a company based in Birmingham, Alabama. Sold that company, went to the Harvard Business School, met another business partner, moved to Vegas, and started another company about 11 years ago. I exited that company in 2016 and then got involved in business school after that. And so I've gone through this process several times. In Vegas, on the company that we started here, we raised, I can't remember the exact number, but somewhere between $3.5 million. All of that money was raised in Vegas. We didn't raise that money outside this market. So I'm familiar with the process. I've been involved with companies that have raised money. I've been involved on the investor side as well. So a pretty decent idea what people are looking for. So listen, why is it important? Due diligence is important. And let me ask you a question. Generally, why do companies fail? Why do you think companies fail? Poor planning, okay?
And lack of money.
Lack of money. All right. Any other ideas on why companies fail? Mismanagement, I'm sure, is one of those. Execution.
Money.
That's right. Mismanagement of money.
But also,
Okay.
they don't know. They didn't calculate out the different things that they'll come into, so they can't like.
Right. Right. Any other ideas?
Yeah, like not enough testing, not enough sense what MVP is, and just circulate that like so.
Okay, so maybe they didn't ultimately build a product that customers wanted, and they just moved forward, so their MVP was a little wonky. What? Any other ideas? Why do startups fail? Any other ideas?
That I think some because somebody else comes along that does it better.
Okay, cool. Competition. Some people put them out, they get put out of business because somebody does it better than they do. Sure, I'm sure that's the reason why it's done. Any other ideas? All right. So there's a great talk that's a great TED talk by a guy named Bill Gross. And Bill Gross runs something called the Idea Lab. And Bill has started multiple companies. He's exited multiple companies. I'm not going to play it in the video because, quite honestly, in a hybrid format, it doesn't work very well, and some people online can't hear it very well. But what Bill did is he said, I've been involved with the Idea Lab, and what they basically did is they would either come up with ideas themselves, fund them, find a team and support them, or they would have teams like come walk in the front door, pitch them, they would fund them. He started multiple companies. And what he did is he said, what are the reasons that companies ultimately fail? And can I narrow it down to 5 or 6 reasons and look at my career and talk to all my friends who've started all these companies and see if we can't figure out why companies fail. And he came up with 5 distinct things that he felt like were the biggest reasons that companies fail. One was lack of funding, right? So they didn't have enough money. One was there was a problem with their business model, right? So the way they did business was messed up in some way, and that might go into execution risk in some way. Another reason was they had a bad idea. The other thing that he came up with was market timing. And the other thing they came up with was the team. So how good were the people that started the company? And so he said, okay, these are the 5 big things that I think that most other things we can throw into that group, right? So maybe they didn't execute correctly. Well, the team wasn't very good. Or maybe there was an issue with funding. Well, that definitely is taken care of with lack of funding. And so then he went and ranked hundreds of companies that he'd been involved in starting, and his friends ranked all these companies that he was involved in starting. And he was actually a little surprised. He thought ideas were so important that he actually named his company the Idea Lab. But it turned out when he did his rankings and all of his buddies did their rankings, idea was number 3 on the list. He said, "Now you can't have a bad idea." The truth is that the idea was less important than I thought it was, meaning that this original eureka moment that actually ultimately led to this fantastic company probably wasn't how the company originally started anyway. And what he figured out was the number 1 reasons that companies are successful, which means the number 1 reason that they fail, is market timing. Was the market ready for the product or service that they ultimately built? Now, some people think, well, that sounds a bit like luck. But the truth is that if the team is good and they can figure out what the right product is for the right time, you can position your company in such a way that you build something that the market timing is right for. And if you think about it intuitively, it makes a great deal of sense. Think about a company like Airbnb. Airbnb was shopped down Sand Hill Road in the Valley for many, many years before it actually received any funding. And you can imagine why, right? Because the pitch was, listen, we have this great idea. Companies or people are going to let random strangers stay in their guest rooms in their house. That was the pitch. And most investors were like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But what's safety? Who's going to let random strangers stay in their house? Well, in their guest house, they're going to let them stay on their property. Why would they do that? And then the recession came, people struggled to pay the mortgage. They overcome some of those fears associated with letting random people stay in their house. They developed a ranking system that allowed you to rank people. They would kick people out of the system that they didn't feel like met the community guidelines. And so they figured out a way to overcome it. So the reality is market timing was a big deal. The same was true with Uber. Think about it. We have no issue getting in someone else's car now and riding around with them in their own car. But yet, I can imagine a time, I can remember I started using Uber in the very beginning. My wife would say, let me get this straight. You're flying to Dallas. You're going to get in a car with someone you don't know, and they're going to take you where you're going. You don't know who that person is. They could kill you. I was like, I don't know who the cab driver is either. At least I know this person is driving their own car. If they crash it, they're going to lose their car. Right? I know something. And so market timing was incredibly important for both of those companies because the pandemic was, not the pandemic, but the first recession, 2007, 2008, was essential for them being able to get traction, both on the consumer side and on the individual side, meaning the renters as well as the people who got inside the cars and rented the space. Because if you were staying in San Francisco, couldn't afford to stay in a hotel, you could pay $50 or $25 to stay in someone's guest room. So market timing turned out to be the number one reason that companies were successful or that failed. The number two reason was the actual team itself. Number three was the idea. Number four was the business model, meaning that some companies didn't even have business models, but yet they were successful. Companies like Facebook were started originally. They didn't even know how they were going to make money, but they gathered a bunch of users and they were going to figure it out. And then funding ended up being the number five reason. But yet, it's not uncommon for many entrepreneurs to think funding is the number one reason their companies fail. Also, I have to say that I see lots of companies that say, well, if I could just get funding, I could be successful. And I'm like, I even hear it in this community. I hear people in this community say our biggest issue is we don't have access to capital. I'm like, that's not our biggest issue. Capital travels most efficiently across any board. It goes across state lines, it goes across national lines. Capital is everywhere, especially right now. If you can't raise money, the problem is not the people who are trying to give you the money. The problem more than likely is you or the team itself or something to do with your concept. Maybe you're not talking to the right people, but more than likely it's not because you ran out of money. If you ran out of money, it could have been because of mismanagement, but let's be honest. If it was a meaningful opportunity, had tremendous potential, people would throw money at it because they want to make money. So when you think about due diligence, think about it from the concept of why do companies fail? So what are the things that are most important that I need to put forward so investors are most comfortable in giving me their money? Oftentimes, people say to me things like, well, they just don't get it. And I'm like, well, that only lasts so long. If no one in the world gets it, then the problem isn't everyone else, it's you. Right? Also, I hear people say, well, the investor wants me to quit my job. And I'm like, look, if the investor's going to give you their money, they want you to take your boat to the island and set the boat on fire. They don't want you to have any way off. Why? Because they gave you their money. And they didn't give it to you because they're friendly and they're a charity. They gave it to you because they hoped you give them more money back in the future. And that's the purpose of the deal. So understanding really what the investor's motivation is a big deal. There's a lot of investors, especially really early stage angel investors, that get a lot of personal satisfaction out of helping companies and growing companies. But let's be totally honest, that's a mentor. If they're willing to give you their money, they expect a return. And if you don't provide them a return or they don't see a pathway to a return, they're not going to give you the money. Okay? So just think about that when you're going through the due diligence process. And this is a great video, by the way. Bill Gross, the Idea Lab, his TED Talk is really good. Now, this is the official definition of due diligence. You'll all get a copy of this deck, so you can you don't have to worry about writing anything down. But this is something that I think is incredibly important. Now, if you looked at these different areas that you rank a company, let's say, for example, the management is capable and motivated. The market demand is as expected. Production is scaled and is planned. All of these say 6 things. And if you look at all of those and you say, okay, the company has a 90% chance of being successful in each one of these six categories. That means there's a 50-50 chance the company is successful. And you look at it and you think, wow, 9 out of 10, that's really good. I got a 9 out of 10 on all 6, 48% chance you get. Pretty good odds that more than likely the company's not going to be successful. So the truth is we have to be incredibly successful across all of these different categories and many more in order for the company to be successful. And you might ask, why does an angel investor expect such a high rate of return? Because I've bet with investors before, and if you can't get them 20 or 30 times their money, they don't care. And the reason is if you take the statistics of an angel investing and you invest in 10 companies as an angel investor, let's say you put $100,000 in each of your 10 companies. So you invested $1 million. The statistics say that 5 of those 10 will go out of business. So $500,000, they just set on fire, gone. Never going to see it again, they burned it. Of the 5 companies that are still in business, 2 of those companies are what's called the walking dead, which means that company still exists, does some sales, pays the bills, all the employees still there, not going to grow quickly, more than likely not a meaningful exit, so the investor's not going to get their money back. They're the worst, actually, because you can't even write off the investment as a loss because the company still exists. Of the 3 companies that are left, 2 of those companies might do somewhere between 2 to 3 times the return. I gave you $100,000, you gave me back $250, maybe $300. So those 2 companies pay for the losses. So after 9 companies, they're even. So the 10th company, maybe they get 20 times return. That's where they made their money. So if you look at angel investing in macro, that's what the statistics say. So if you can't provide a meaningful investment to an investor 20 to 30 times, they're not interested. Why? Because that's what the numbers look like for. And I've met lots of angel investors that say, well, the next company must be my 10th deal because I've lost money on all the others. So just keep that in mind and understand that that's ultimately, there's lots of motivations. There's lots of, they like to see you succeed. They've had people help them. All of those are factors. And I don't say they're not factors. But the truth is, they didn't pick 10 of those companies and say, well, I think 5 are going to go out of business. They thought all 10 were going to be successful. And they thought all 10 were going to give them a 20 to 30 times return. And it turned out it didn't. So keep that in mind and make sure you understand their motivation. And understand the likelihood of success is relatively low. Also, if one of these is a 50-50 shot, right? By looking at one of these things, liability and litigation is avoided, maybe 50% chance they avoid that. The probability the company fails, the likelihood to succeed is only 27%. Pretty long odds, right? Okay, so when do most investors want to engage in due diligence? And this is pretty important because sometimes if you're dealing with experienced investors, most of them have made mistakes. And so what they traditionally do is they set up a set of criteria that they look at it and say, okay, I'm not going to invest in a company unless they meet these certain criteria, if they're smart. Some investors look at it and say, oh, I like that deal, I like that deal, give me that deal, that's a great one over there, and they're just investing all over the place. Pretty good chance most of those companies are going to lose money. Okay? So most of the time, investors will look at it and say, okay, if the company meets certain criteria, then I'll consider investment. And those criteria can include things like industry specific. Let's say I was a CTO at AT&T, so I know everything about the telecommunications industry. Made a lot of money. I want to invest in telecom companies. Well, I don't know anything about AI. I don't know anything about medical devices, but I know telecom. So if it's in telecom, I'm interested. Or if it's in communications, I'm interested. So oftentimes, angel investors like to look at deals that are in a specific industry. Why? Because they feel like they bring value to the table and they know something about it. They're not just guessing because some industries they don't know anything about. So some investors say, I don't invest in any companies that are pre-revenue. If you don't have revenue, don't talk to them. Some will say, yeah, I'll invest in pre-revenue companies. But it depends on what their criteria is. It's compelling. Some look at it and say, in terms of market size, in terms of potential, it's compelling in some way. The exit in 5 years, listen, let's be totally honest, most angel investors are lucky if they get their money out in 7 years. But if you can show them a meaningful plan of exit in 5 to 6, they're much more likely to be comfortable. If you're like, I don't know, maybe we'll get out in 10 or 12. Probably not gonna happen. I actually know several angel investors that they've stopped investing because in their own words, I'll be dead by the time the money gets out anyway. Because they're old enough or late enough in their career, they're like, no chance, I'm out. I'm out of the game because it takes too long, right? They might say, okay, if it has strong management, I'm interested. But if it doesn't, I'm out. So there's lots of reasons or different things that investors have in terms of criteria for investing in a company. In fact, I know a company, local company, that had raised a couple $1 million. And the investment group came in and asked me if I would come in and help them do some things. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But I asked some of the investors, why did you invest in this company? And they're like, I believed in the founder. I didn't really know if the tech was really that great, but I knew they could pull off something. So sometimes this is a pretty big deal, right? How strong is the founder? How good is the management? Invalid reasons for angel investors to invest. It's what's left. I've thrown all these other deals out. I need to make a deal. That's what's left on the table. And I have some money and I need to invest it. Those are the reasons angel investors are looking to invest more than likely. All right. So in terms of how due diligence, these are the kind of things that angel investors look for. So for example, and this is actually the due diligence process, meaning what are they looking for in terms of documents? You pass those out, Logan, that'd be great. This is just an example of, I think it's actually AngelNV's due diligence list. It's a pretty good list. I sent Logan 2 more that he can email out to you guys. Some of them are way more comprehensive. Like I've got a couple that I got one from the Angel Capital Association that's like, I think 7 pages. I think RVF's is 3 or 4 pages, Rebel Venture Fund. And so that one's a relatively simple one, and I think it's a pretty good place to start when you're putting together a list of material that you need for due diligence. But these are the kind of things that investors look for when they're doing their due diligence and the methods in which they use to do the due diligence. And so, for example, is there a trusted lead investor or group? This is often a really big deal. I know a few what I would call lead investors that if they invest in a deal, other people will invest behind them because they know that person will keep up with everything. Like some of the investors, like, I don't really want to go to the informational meetings. I don't want to be on the board. I don't want to do any of those things. I need somebody to take the lead, and if that lead investor's in, then they'll invest behind them because they know that person will send out all the updates to them and all that kind of stuff, right? So if there is a good lead investor, which is really important if you're raising money, if you can find a lead, and keep in mind that lead in venture capital means something slightly differently because of syndication and other things. But in angel investors or early stage investors, if you can find someone that's incredibly active in investing and isn't afraid to be the first investor in, negotiate the term sheet, then oftentimes that person brings a lot of other people into the deal with them. And you don't have to work as hard to get those other people because there's some credibility when the lead is in. Okay? Sometimes groups share their due diligence package. So some people will have gathered all of that information, and an angel group will take it, put it together in a really nice document, and then they'll send it out to other investors that they can then use to say, well, I haven't done my own due diligence, but at least I can use this to start. And then if I've got additional questions, then instead of asking all of these questions, I'll just ask the ones that aren't included in the due diligence package. Some will use an outside law firm. Literally, they'll go hire a firm, they'll do due diligence on the company, they'll come back and provide a report. Some groups, angel groups specifically, they might have a committee that's specifically set up to do the due diligence for the group. And they'll go out, gather all the information, prepare the reports, share it with the group, and then they'll decide whether or not they want to make an investment based on that due diligence package. There's 2-way due diligence, and I think this is pretty important. Many times, I understand the feeling, but oftentimes entrepreneurs, I mean, you're kind of beggars, right? Sometimes, really. But the truth is, you better do due diligence on your investor. Let me just put it this way. If you and your potential investor are having a hard time getting along during the honeymoon phase, there's no chance that it's going to go well after they've invested in the company. Because both of you are trying to be at your best because they want to make an investment in your company. You're at your best because you want them to invest in the company. And if it's friction already, walk away. It's a tough marriage after the contract signed and they've sent you the money. So make sure you do an investment, do two-way due diligence and due diligence on your investor. Some organizations use or investors use professional firms or consultants. Some do it themselves. They got their own list. They got it offline or somewhere, and they sit down and go through the list with you. This is a really interesting question here. A lot of investors ask me, do I sign an NDA? I would never sign an NDA. I would never sign a non-disclosure agreement. Never. And if you have an expectation as a company that the investor will sign an NDA, you're probably not going to raise the money. You don't have to wait to give away all the secret sauce. You don't have to say my compound has this amount of this and this amount of that and this and that. You don't have to give all that away. But if you can't raise money without an NDA in place, you're probably not going to raise money. I've had lots of people come to me and say, hey, I'd really like to talk about this opportunity, but I need to sign an NDA. That's the only thing I know for sure is you're not going to make it. And usually that's offensive. How can you say that? I'm like, because you can't raise the money. Because no investor is going to sign an NDA. Some will. Most experienced ones will not. And why will they not sign one? Well, there's lots of reasons. One is because they're looking at your deal, but what if a year later somebody comes along the line that's got something in a similar industry that they're better than you? Well, now they can't even look at it. Well, they can't do anything because, by the way, they signed an NDA a year ago in that industry they can't invest in. So there's lots of reasons you don't sign an NDA. I wouldn't sign an NDA, and most investors that I know won't sign it. So you need to package your company in such a way that you can talk about what you do without having to give away the farm. And then if you get to second or third or fourth phase of due diligence, maybe you feel like there's an NDA and there's enough trust in place, maybe. But right out of the gate, no way. The investor should shoulder all the cost. Meaning that if they go hire a firm to do their due diligence, you don't pay them. The investor pays for that. Now, there might be a lot of stuff you have to do in preparation for the due diligence, but you shouldn't pay somebody externally to do due diligence on your own firm. All right, any questions about any of those? All right. So this is a continuation of the things that you should look for as an angel investor. In regards to the team, these are the types of things that investors often look for in a team when they do their due diligence. So, you know, they do a background check. They should check credentials. If you have on there that you have a PhD and blah, 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 they should probably make sure you have a PhD. Because if they can uncover character issues that are relatively simple to figure out, they're much more likely to avoid something that will be disastrous for them in the future. You know, they check their mindset, right? So, are they coachable? Do they have good judgment? Do they have good leadership skills? Are they persuasive? Persuasive may sound like, well, are they a snake oil salesman? No, but they have to be able to pitch their company, and they have to be able to get customers. They have to be able to get investors. If they don't have those skills, it decreases the likelihood that the company is going to be successful. So sometimes companies or investors will rank their company's team based on these type of things. Listen, honesty and integrity is like probably number one on most lists. And if they can't trust what you say, or you can't trust each other, it's already hard enough. So if that's not, if integrity is an issue, then they're going to walk away. And that's why I always tell entrepreneurs who are doing a pitch, say in front of a group of investors, if you don't know the answer, do not make it up. Because they may be asking the question because they know the answer. And now you've answered as if you're the expert, and they know you're wrong, and now you're done. Okay? So don't make it up. I think it's okay sometimes to answer a question and say, well, listen, I don't know for sure, but based on my experience, my guess would be it would be this. Or I tell you what, let me get that information and get back to you next week. You're much better off, even if you feel like that, man, I probably should have known that, than making it up. If you make it up, you're in big trouble. Somebody probably already Googled it, and they're fisting to kill you.
Dr.
All right.
Martin,
Yes.
question. It's Maggie. How many angels do you know that actually do a background investigation? You know, pay one of those agencies to investigate the co-founders?
I don't know a ton that actually like hire a private investigator, but I know a fair number that will just go on one of these websites and pay $25 to get a background check on people just to see, are there pending legal issues, things like that. I think that's, I don't know if it's common, but I do know people that do it.
Thank you.
It's just too inexpensive not to figure out. Okay, so these are the kind of things that investors consider in terms of your business model. What's your value proposition? Is it compelling? Do they understand it? I see companies sometimes that I'm like, but why is that different than the 8,000 other ones that are doing the same thing? And it doesn't. When I think that, I'm not necessarily thinking, well, there might be room for other competitors in the market. I'm actually more fearful when people come to me and say, no one in the world does this. Because I'm normally like, ooh, maybe a reason. Maybe it's because no one wants it and all those companies fail, right? Pretty slim chance that you're the only person in the history of the world that's come up with this uniquely original idea. So possible, somewhat unlikely. So usually if there are other competitors, I don't think that's a bad thing. Actually, I think it shows that there's market demand for the product, right? But do you have a compelling value proposition? What does your distribution channel look like? I think sometimes this is oversimplified because distribution or channel distribution is really freaking hard. If you have to get into Walmart in order to be in business, well, that may take you 5 years. And by the way, you may have to sell the product under cost until you can reach scale in manufacturing, and you have to take back all your returns and blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, you're losing money. So your distribution and how it works in your business model is something that I think is something make sure you're on top of, because I, as an investor, would be uncomfortable if I didn't think you could build your distribution network necessary. Now, because I think people oversimplify that. Differentiation, how am I different than everyone else? What is my growth strategy? Am I going to acquire other companies to grow? Am I going to get customers through my own e-commerce platform? What is my growth strategy for growing the business? Am I going to franchise the business? Do I have recurring revenue? Everybody loves recurring revenue. I got a customer. I get them again next month because they send me more money. The next month they send me more money. The next month they send me more money. Everyone loves recurring revenue. Why? Because you don't have to go get another customer every time. I got this customer, they gave me money, they went away, I got to go find another one, right? So everyone loves recruiting. Probably doesn't know about that. Capital requirements. So how much money is it going to take? What's the deal structure look like? Meaning not necessarily the deal structure between me and the company, but the deal structure meaning what does it look like for me to do business? Do I have to have licensing to do business in this area? How long does it take me to get a contract in place with the airport, right? What does the deal structure look like in terms of my customer? And how long does it take those kind of things to be done? And ultimately, what does my exit strategy look like? All right, financial projections. These are tough, right? They're tough to build. They're tough to analyze. The only thing I know about your financial projections is they're wrong. That's the only thing I can say for sure. They are not correct. Now, they may be 10% off. They may be 50% off. They may be totally wrong. But the only thing I know for sure is they're not right. And I'm trying to figure out how close to right are they. I will say that I know a fair number of investors that they'll take the numbers that you give them that you've told them are conservative. Because every entrepreneur says, well, this is a conservative estimate of what I think the next 5 years are going to look like. Most investors will take those numbers, cut them in half, double the costs, and see if the business still makes sense. because it will probably take twice as long to do what you think you're going to do, and it'll cost twice as much. And if the business still makes sense, then maybe it's reasonable. And even though you say it's conservative, pretty good chance they don't believe it. So in other words, if you have realistic assumptions, 1% market share. If you have a consumer-based business, this is a death trap. Because what startups like to do is they like to say, well, my customer is every American. Because that's a big number. Right? You can say, wow, 170 something million American males. If I can just get 1/2 of 1%, then I can build the whole business. First of all, the only thing startups never have enough of are people or money. And the truth is that you can't market to 170 million people. And so you're actually better off early on saying, we've identified our customer archetype, and it's African-American males between the age of 18 and 32. Why? Because you can market to that segment as a small startup and get traction. It doesn't mean that you don't release additional products in the future that expand your potential market. But the reality is that we all like to say, if I can get 1% of the market, I can build a business. Be careful, because you have to have a really big number to get 1%. And that 1% seems to be something that everyone looks for, and they roll their eyes when they see somebody say, I can see 1%. Cash flow timing. So what do my numbers look like? When am I going to run out of money again? Do I have a plan, or have I put a plan in place, or have I listed a plan on how I'm going to raise the money I need in the future? Do I have reasonable expenses? And this goes both ways, meaning, am I paying my group enough to where they don't starve or leave? But is everyone making so much money that they don't really care? Right? So reasonable goes both ways. Are they too low in terms of expenses, or are they too high in terms of expenses? Realistic revenue growth. We've all done it. We've all seen it, right? You have the hockey stick, goes like this, and this is my sales growth. I just wouldn't recommend it. No one believes that. Market salaries and equity. So the people that I've hired, or the team, the founders that we have in place, what are we paying ourselves relative to what the market demand is? Is that relatively reasonable for a startup? You're going to get those questions, so be prepared to answer those questions. Does the business have slim margins? Listen, people are really uncomfortable funding startups that in your projections have slim margins, because they're like, wow, if it's really that tight, if anything goes wrong, this thing's not going to make it. Right? Some businesses just have slim margins. But I will also say equity investors, meaning people who are giving you money that ultimately will invest in your company, as opposed to some sort of loan with collateral. Low margin businesses make them very good. What does your balance sheet look like? What does your cash management look like? What does your cash management skills look like? So these are the other general things that I think investors look at in companies when they're doing the due diligence. So what are my general impressions of the individual or the opportunity? Now, it is interesting to me. I've never talked someone into a deal. Never. I've never successfully pitched it long enough that I changed their mind, and all of a sudden they're like, you convinced me, I'm in. If they're uncomfortable at the beginning, they're uncomfortable all the way through, and they're probably not going to do it. Now, I think actually that's a good thing. The nicest thing an investor can ever say is no. And that means you don't waste your time. So if an investor comes to you and says, look, it's not going to happen, then you say, appreciate your time. Love to circle back with you in the future, give you an update if that's okay. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you, and move on. Their initial general impressions are usually where they're going to land. And if they're uncomfortable in the beginning, they're going to be uncomfortable all the way through, usually. Culture. So what's the culture of the organization look like? Is it authoritarian? Is it team? What is it? And the culture that the organization has sometimes is something that I would look at it. I would talk to the employees. And, you know, if a founder's like, look, I don't want you to talk to my people, I'm like, all right, well, you don't need my money. Because, listen, I'm about to give you money. if I'm going to give you money, I want to be comfortable that we're all on the same page, and I want to be comfortable that your employees. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to stab you in the back, but I'm asking them questions just to make sure that everything adds up. I'm not, digging into the business as much as I'm really just trying to figure out, how the employees feel about the opportunity. Ask for references. This is very common. It could be from other investors. It could be from advisory members on your board, wherever those sources may be. Talk to customers. I think sometimes people would ask to talk to customers. Depending on the opportunity, I would probably try to find or ask to talk to a customer, because it's kind of valuable, it's kind of not, because you're not going to give me a bad customer. So I may try to find a customer that I already know you're doing business with, that you didn't give me their name. Because you're not going to give me the customer that you screwed. You're going to give me the customer that loves you, because that's what we do, right? That's what the references. What do your advisors look like? What do your competitors look like? Even when I was running a company, I'd go see who my competitors were, and I'd go meet them. So I was just curious what they did, how they did it, whatever. Just because I was wondering how things worked out. Obviously, valuation is a big deal. So they're always thinking about valuation. And then finally, how long, meaning how soon do you need the money? Those are all things that companies or investors are going to consider when they're considering investing in a company. Now, ultimately, do you get this point? Yes or no? Do I still believe? And in the beginning, as I mentioned before, I've never talked anyone into an investment. I think I'd probably talk people out of investing. Over time, you keep talking, keep doing this and that. Next thing you know, they don't want to do it. But ultimately, if they've gone through all of that stuff that we just covered and they still say yes, then I usually recommend to most investors move forward. Right? Likely, it's always a risk, but if you feel comfortable, move forward. No deal is perfect. Every single deal has problems. No deal is perfect. The question is things like, let me give you an example. If the company is in an industry and the founder has some experience that's missing other things, that they're lacking financial literacy experience, well, they're at least aware of it and they've hired someone to help them, right? So every deal has problems, but are you comfortable with the solutions that can fix the problem? Or are you comfortable that they can be overcome? Some things for some investors are deal breakers, like, if they feel like the founder has some major character issues, they're usually out, right? If there are other things that they recognize as founders that they're lacking in terms of skills, and they've figured out ways to bring in partners or consultants or something to support them in those areas, then that makes them feel a lot more comfortable. Another thing that investors look at is, do I feel like I provide value? Right? Some investors just want to write you a check, and they're like, call me later. Give me an update. Let me know how it's going. But some investors are like, you're in an industry where I used to work for the last 35 years. Can I introduce you? Let's work on some things and make sure we're ready. But can I start to introduce you to some of my contacts who might be potential customers, who could be vendors, who could be whatever. And so most investors like to invest in deals that they feel like they bring value to the table, because they increase the likelihood that their investment is going to be successful. And then know yourself and your group. That basically means that if you as an investor are looking at your group and thinking, oh, this isn't really a deal we're going to do or whatever, just kill it right out of the gate and have a process to decide. And this also means inside an angel group, whatever that investment group decision looks like, make sure that it's defined. So for example, if the angel group is, we all invest a certain amount of money and majority rules, and if we all vote and majority rules and we all make an investment, whatever that looks like. And it's good for you to understand that if you're working with a group. If you're working with individuals, it's less important, right? But if you're working with Pasadena Angels or the Tech Coast Angels or the Desert Angels or whoever, make sure that you understand that process, because that's ultimately the process that's going to get you successful at investment or not. All right. So in terms of due diligence, here's the big takeaways. for me. One, be very transparent, and don't be elusive. If you have an issue, put it on the table. You might not want to put it on the table in the very first meeting, but by the second meeting, it probably needs to be on the table. And the reason is because they're going to find out about it eventually. And if you hid it from them in some way, then they're going to know. And that's going to kill the deal meeting. The other thing is that investors typically invest in people. So if there are things that you've done or experiences that you've had that increase the likelihood that you will be credible in terms of the opportunity, then you need to showcase that, because that makes investors comfortable. The other thing I'll say is be cognizant of the fact that you're spending other people's money. Because investors want to know that you're going to do the best you can to return an investment to them. And so I can remember I was with a business partner, this was 20 years ago, and someone came to my business partner and said, look, I want to talk to you about an investment opportunity. And my partner's like, hey, why don't you come along? I was like, sure. So we're sitting there at lunch, and the guy's like, he had this, actually it wasn't a terrible idea. He had this was when CD-ROMs and computers were becoming a lot more popular. And he had developed a business card. He had developed a disc that was in the shape of a business card. And the same exact size as the business card. So if you took next to a business card, it would lay right on top of it. You could drop it into a CD-ROM, even though it wasn't completely circular, it was kind of rectangular. It would spin and it would play a video about your company. Not a bad idea. Not a big idea, not a bad idea. And he told my partner, he says, I need $25,000. My partner was like, sounds like to me you need 5 credit cards. He's like, wow, that's pretty risky. He said, let me get this straight. You're not willing to get 5 credit cards and run them up to get this business started, but you want me to give you $25,000 to do it? Doesn't sound like you're really in. So the point is, investors want to make sure that you have skin in the game. If you have no risk, they will not come in. If you're all in, they're much more likely to be comfortable in coming in. But if you have 2 or 3 exit ramps that you get off on, or you're like, well, I need to raise the money because I don't want to put any of my own money in, they're not going to invest. So make sure that you're in the game, or they're not coming in, because they'll be uncomfortable with the lack of risk that you have as part of the deal. Right. Any questions? Maggie, you got to go ahead.
First one was transparency. Second one was, I don't remember. Third was be aware that you're spending other people's money. And fourth was, what was the second one again?
So I think second one was, what was second one? Incredible. Yeah, if there are things that you've done, people invest in people. So if there are things that you've done in your career, started companies, had multiple exits, returned money to investors, whatever those things are, make sure that you highlight those things, because they're going to be much more likely to invest if they believe that you're capable of pulling it off.
Now, the first one, you said you've got issues. So if you're trying to pitch this to somebody and you want them to invest, how are you going to tell them your issues? You know what I mean?
Well, listen, and when I say issues, I mean things like, here are the things that I worry about.
Okay.
Right? I don't mean issues like, look, I'm probably going to jail next week.
Yeah, that's probably not going to.
You're not going to get it anyway. You can tell them.
We'll leave that out.
Doesn't matter. You're not going to get the money anyway. Right? Well, you might go to jail for not representing that. But I mean things like, these are the big things that keep me up at night. I'm worried that one of my employees could leave. And if they do, I feel like I'm in a tough spot. Right?
That's something everybody.
That's exactly right. Whatever those things are, I guess what I'm saying is transparency is key. And listen, there's a bit of a honeymoon phase, right? I mean, when you're doing your pitch, you're up here selling. When you're at a coffee meeting with the person that walked up and handed you a business card after you did your pitch, and you're sitting there talking, you're still selling, but you're also representing some things that you may be a little bit worried about, because I think it shows a little bit of humility. I think it shows that you don't have significant blind spots that that decreases the likelihood that you can pull it off. So let me give you a specific example. I think that illustrates my point. There's an investment group down in Australia that I talked to a few times that called me looking for some deals. They did a lot of gaming deals, so they called me looking for some deals. And, I asked them at the very beginning, I said, what's your investing criteria? Because I don't want to talk to you about any deals you're not interested in. I don't want to waste your time. And he said, well, one of our biggest ones is if you were successful in your first exit, and this is your second deal, we're out. We will not invest. And the idea is that if you were successful on your first time and you haven't failed yet, they're uncomfortable because they think that you're too cocky, don't lack the humility necessary to be successful, and more than likely you're going to get hit by the bus because you're not aware of it. And so whatever those criteria are, that's what was on their criteria. So my point is that I think that if it's okay to be supremely confident, because I think that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. If you weren't confident you could pull it off, you wouldn't do it. Or you would be crazy to do it. But make sure that you're at least aware of your weaknesses, because I think it makes you much more coachable, it makes the investor much more comfortable that you can pull it off. Yes, ma'am.
You said talk about failing in your first deal, or talking about starting a company that failed. This is the second one.
So what I was saying is the opposite. So let's say I started a company and I was successful. I built the company and sold the company. And we made money. That investment group wouldn't invest in me in my next deal because they weren't comfortable that I had the same drive I had the first time, and I was humble enough to pull it off the second time. Now, entrepreneurship is a really weird place. And the reason I say it's a weird place is that nowhere else, how we doing on time, Logan? Okay, we're good. If you sit in a room with a group of entrepreneurs and investors aren't there, no one else is there, it's just a group of people who start companies. They're pretty open in sharing their failures. And the reason is because you haven't even done it until you fail. Meaning that I had a buddy one time who loved to ski, and he wasn't very good, but he loved to ski. And he would fall all the way down. And I was like, dude, why do you ski so fast? He says, if you're not pushing it to the point where you're falling, you're not skiing. That was his mentality. So I guess my point is, in many ways, entrepreneurship is one of the few areas where you're not rewarded for failure, but it's part of the process. If I work for a big company and I fail on a big project, they fire me. But in entrepreneurship, it's kind of like, man, that's part of the way it lives, right? I mean, that's part of the life. Your chances are it's more likely you're going to fail to be successful. And so entrepreneurs, when they sit around and commiserate, no one has judgment for failure. That's for sure.
We actually have a question online as well. Maggie, if you want to take it with it.
Yes, okay, so this is from Jonathan. He's saying, aloha. Would you be able to give me some feedback on due diligence when I'm trying to break into a very niche market, but don't have a single resource in that market to really turn to for advice and support? And this particular market is dominated by a few very well-known players.
Well, so first of all, what I would do is if I was going into a market that was pretty small, not in the sense of the size of the market, but small in terms of the network, is I would go target people in the network. And there's lots of ways you can find that out. If you're in a relatively niche or small network market, I would go on Crunchbase and find all the companies that had been invested in my space. And then I would go find all the people that invested in all those companies. And then I would go start to build a network with those investors. I would build up an advisory team. I would talk to people in the industry specifically that I could convince to come and spend time with me or mentor me. That's what I would do. But the other thing that's really important is there's a phrase that I heard a couple years ago, and I think it really is actually spot on, is that if you want advice, then ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. And I think that's really true. And so oftentimes I've raised money from individuals that I didn't target to raise money from. I targeted them specifically because I needed something from them. I needed them to help me with something. I needed them to connect me with someone, and I asked them for advice. And as they got to know me or the opportunity, they became investors. And so I think that's an interesting, so that's what I would do. I would go find the people that are in the industry. And even though there might be some big players, there are other people that were early investors. And I would go talk to them and I would ask them questions about the industry. And that's the way I built my network.
I have another question from Yevis. He says, how much does the data collected from alpha and beta tests matter to investors?
Most of them just want to know it works. And I don't really know what the application is of the alpha and beta testing. But if you're talking about product testing, they just really want to know if it works and to what degree it works. If you're talking about something else in terms of some sort of financial metric, most of them early investors wouldn't understand.
I think it was just talking about testing. Oh, all right. Here's a clarification. OTA booking platform for traveling workers.
So are they talking about alpha or beta testing for the software? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it must be for the software. He says yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, if you know things like what are your conversion rates, that's a big deal, right? So what is my cost of customer acquisition? Meaning that if I spend $100 or $50 to get a customer, and if there are a repeat customer, what is the lifetime value of the customer? All those kind of things are important. Anything that you could provide that makes investors more comfortable that your deal will be successful, I guess is the way I would put it.
I think there's a case to be made for if you have beta testers and you've got a finite number of them.
Beta testers, you mean people?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you were
potential
talking-
customers.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And if they're so excited about your product that they start telling other people, even though it's supposed to be a limited beta, but they just can't help themselves, that's a really good sign.
For sure. I mean, if you're having to hold people at the gate to keep them from coming in the gate, that's never a bad thing. People are lining up at the front door, can't wait to get in to buy your new whatever. That's fantastic.
That's product market fit right there.
That's right. If you have 5,000, 100,000, 1 million people signed up for your wanting to be notified the minute your portal opens, that's a big deal. Sure, 100%. I'd put on my first slide.
Questions from inside the room? Got a question?
You go back to the very beginning.
Yep.
Timing the market.
Yep.
3 best ways to do that.
Okay, so there's some tools that you can use that have been adopted over the last 10 or 15 years.
Please, I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. So the question was, how do I figure out market timing, right? And whether or not the market timing is correct.
That's
Now,
number one.
That's right, for sure. And there are some tools that you can use to help you figure that out. Now, Maggie mentioned the term, everybody familiar with the term product market fit? Meaning that I've identified a product which provides value to a customer in such a way that they're willing to give me money for said product or service, right? So I have product market fit. When you develop an idea, what used to happen is you would go in stealth mode and you would go down to your basement and you'd work on it and you'd build this thing and then you'd come out to the world and you stand up at the top of the mountain and you'd say, look, I have my thing, everyone wants it, everyone should come by. That was the way it used to be done. And what's changed over time is this lean startup mentality, which is more along the lines of there's a tool that you can use called a business model canvas that you basically, it's everything that you think you know about your business on one page. And the most important thing is who's my customer and what is my value proposition. And then what you do is you go out and you do customer discovery. And when you do customer discovery, you're not out there saying, what do you think about my widget? What you're actually doing is you're saying, tell me about the last time you did fill in the blank. What were the things that were problems with doing that? What were the things that you liked about doing that? Or tell me about the last time you used this product. What were the things that were good about this product? What were the things that were bad about this product? And what you're trying to identify is you're trying to identify things that customers are struggling with or where their pain points. And you're trying to identify whether or not the solution that you're developing will solve those pain points. And so that's a way to figure out if your market timing is right. Because if you can identify people want my widget because I've gone out and done this customer discovery, then you don't go build it and walk it out and roll it down the street and say everybody wants it now because you don't know. It's a guess. So that's one thing that you can do. So if you just look up lean startups, there are probably thousands of videos that talk you through that process. But that's one of the best tools to figure out market timing. Because the idea is that instead of building a finished product that has 10 value propositions that you thought up in your room, what you do is you go out and you say, oh, from talking to customers, it turns out that these 3 value propositions are most important. And so that would be my minimum viable product. These value propositions 7 or 8 actually accounts for 80% of my cost, but yet no one cares. So you don't actually build it into the original product, you build something that's more likely to be successful. Now, let's use Airbnb, for example. When they started, they didn't rent whole houses or whole apartments. They were renting rooms in people's houses. And then they were like, people were like, well, I can build a whole business around this. I can buy 3 or 4 apartments and rent them out. And that grew into that. But that wasn't their first product.
Dr. Martin?
Yes.
We have another question from the online group saying, what are your thoughts on linking a physical product to an NFT? Do you see it being a must need in the future?
Okay. So.
Well, we should probably start with non-fungible tokens.
Yeah. So NFT, everybody knows what NFT is, right? At this point, right? I'll give you my opinion because I think that's the only thing I can really do. Is because I think it's early enough in the market cycle that we're not exactly sure where NFTs are going to go. But what I will say is, I think until things reach scalability where a significant number of people can access or use or a product or service, then I think it's difficult to build it into something significant. Let me give you an example. Even cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies have been around for a very long time. But if you tried to buy a Bitcoin 8 years ago, it was a freaking disaster. You're like, man, I gotta jailbreak my phone and download some sort of side wallet. You gotta put it in there, and then I think it's in there. I don't know if it is or not. And then Coinbase came along and set it up like a brokerage firm, and you could just buy and sell things and store it into their platform. And then it became wildly popular, right? So until those platforms came along, it was more difficult. My point is, I think NFTs are in the same phase. Right now, if you want an NFT for the NBA, you got to go buy it on the NBA NFT platform. So I think the people that really make tons of money in the NFT market are people that are going to build platforms that allow universal buying and selling of these NFTs on a platform across everything, right? So I could take my NBA NFT, put it on this platform and sell it, as opposed to only be restricted to people that go to the NFT platform for the NBA. And then it becomes more of a financial instrument as opposed to some quirky digital asset that no one can really explain. So back to the original question. Do I think NFTs have to be connected to physical products? I think it's no different than anything else. I think some people will like to have a physical product along with their NFT, and then for other people that will be a hindrance. The last thing they want is a physical product. The whole advantage of having an NFT is I can store it on my hard drives and I don't have to have a physical product. So I think it just depends. It's too early to tell.
Okay, and Greg Klund said that this was incredibly enlightening and he was going to be reviewing this session several times and gives him a lot of work to do.
Good luck.
What you all founders should know is that Dr. Martin actually presented this as one of our courses to our new baby angels so that they would have an idea of what their workload was going to be. But it was just an inkling of what their workload was going to be. They had 6 weeks of due diligence, and it was split among about 6 people on each team. And trust me, we talked to customers, we talked to suppliers, we talked to advisors, board members, everybody. So within AngelNV, we do a lot of the work. Even if the handout that you got doesn't seem like it was a lot of work, the reports that got put together were extensive.
Yeah, it is a lot. And also keep in mind that because it is a lot of work, if you're prepared, that makes them much more comfortable that you're an investable company. So for example, if you take that list and make sure you have all that information readily available, and they say, hey, I need your incorporation documents. And you were to say, well, why don't you just send me everything you need and I'll just send you the whole packet. Then they're like, oh, great. I don't have to do all that legwork.
How that was in talking to a lot of things that pitched a lot of investors too. That was one of the things, 2 things. One, I would get, oh, you're way further along than what we thought. And then also, you've done an incredible amount of work on this.
Right.
So I think that for people just getting started on pitching too, that's the thing, is if you haven't done that incredible amount of work, you're not ready to pitch it.
Probably not. If you can't, at a minimum.
Dr. Martin, what was the question or the comment?
So her point was that she had investors come to her and say, wow, you're further along in the process than I thought you were. And her other point was, you're probably not ready to pitch until you have your data put together. Now, there's actually companies, and Startup NV may have dealt with some of these companies, I don't know, but there are actually companies now that will manage your data warehouse.
Yes, SendDoc will do that.
That's right. And you put everything in there, and if investors interested, you give them access to it and you can see what they've accessed. But most investors, if you're not to that point where maybe it's not in a deal room, but maybe it's in something, if you're not to that point, then you're probably not ready to raise money.
Isn't Gus kind of like, they have kind of almost like an online deal room with all your documents that you can store on there?
So her comment was Gus has an online deal room. I suspect that many of those platforms now have added that feature because of the expectation that I should be able to get a link and get all the information I need.
So I do have another question too. Like I started out in front of all the wrong investors, but I figured it was good to pitch back, so I just kept pitching, right? But then I ended up, I started out with like tech investors, because there's bazillions of them, right? Then I ended up getting to private equity firms that are in my space, which is food tech and consumer product good. And then they referred me to, because we didn't need it. And they're like, well, we're really 2 to 5 million in the lowest end. So then they referred us to venture capital groups who are really, honestly, a little further, because we're like right at the end of pre-seed, beginning seed. And so what happened was, even though it was like talking to people, but here's my thing. So now we're looking at people to fill out our pre-seed round and get rolling. They're saying, come back to us, a lot of them, which, I know they say a lot of nice, no thank you, but come back to us, keep us informed. It's typically not blowing you off. But they want, like, when we get 500,000 in revenue, when we hit our first million in revenue, they're like, come back to us because we really like your stuff.
Well, so her point was,
yeah, like for me then, like, so we get funded, we get rolling.
right.
Like, how long should I wait to start funding again?
Oh, good question.
We have to start regionally as opposed to nationally because of where we're at.
So the question was specifically, how far in advance do I need to prepare raising a round before I need the money?
Yeah, the next.
So general rule of thumb, and there are lots of variables. Variables include things like what kind of round you're raising, right? So if you're doing a private equity round, it may be longer. If you're doing just an early stage round, a seed round or an early A or something like that, it's typically 6 months.
Okay, so probably,
So 6 months before you need the money, you need to be raising the money.
okay.
Because if you get within that 60-day window and you need the money, you're in trouble. And you're in trouble for lots of reasons. One is because they know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And pretty good chance that they're going to get a really good deal. And then two, you're in a bit of a panic mode.
Well,
And you're not going to get the best deal for yourself as well.
okay, then I have a follow-on question to that. So once we close this first round and we get going, then there's fracturing. We can use fracture, I have 2 fractured people that can give us, that funding.
Huh?
But the cost of that funding is so high, if I end up using that for purchase orders, is that gonna hurt me for my second round, my C, my A?
Okay, so you're saying you're using factoring companies.
If I
right?
use a factoring company,
Right.
once I get that initial amount, if we start getting more orders from interested parties, I would have to use that potentially, or have to put them off longer.
So here's the way I would answer that question. I would only raise money. Okay. I would never raise money unless it was my only option. Why? Because I'm selling my company,
I agree.
right? I'm giving part of my company away for that. And so I own less of the company, which sometimes isn't a bad thing. I have lots of entrepreneurs that say, I don't want to raise any money because I don't want to give away part of my company. And I'm like, well, 100% of zero is still zero.
Exactly.
5% of a billion is a lot. Right? So what I would say is I would always avoid raising money if there were other alternatives.
Okay.
That's my personal preference. Now, some people are like, don't use factoring. And I'm like, well, it depends on how expensive the factoring is.
Well, because factoring, you're gonna probably pay up to 24% on that money, depending, but like I have the distribution in place, and now I have the government. I applied for a thing with the government, but now there's potential that I could go into the trade winds summit in United Arab Emirates and Israel and all that. Well, I do have a connection to the Exim Bank, but that's another one too. Does the Exim Bank, will they fund purchase orders too for exporting?
Okay, so that's a good question. So the question was, will banks fund things other than traditional asset-based lending? And the way I'll answer that is that 10 years ago, I would have said no. Banks would only fund you. I need equipment. I'm going to buy the equipment. You're going to give me money for the equipment. If I go out of business, you're going to take it and sell it and then try to pay off the debt, right? Today, because of Silicon Valley Bank and other banks, so Silicon Valley Bank is a good example. So they actually give lines of credits and credit cards to startups. Not big numbers, 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, something like that. And the way they look at it isn't necessarily that I'm trying to make money on those small amounts of money. I'm trying to get access to a deal that might raise a lot of money in the future because I can participate in that deal and all of my partners can participate in that deal. So the question for them is, how do I get access to these deals and build a relationship with them before they get there? And one of the ways they figured it out is I'll give you a credit card with $3,000 on it.
Okay.
Right? So my point is that I don't know about the bank you're talking about, but I do know that there are more now. There are more banks doing more interesting things now than before.
Okay, yeah, because
If it's Bank of America, no. If it's Chase Bank, no. If it's some other unusual bank, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, because the export-import bank, the Exim Bank is with the government, so.
I have no clue. My personal thought is that if they're associated with the government, they're anti-risk.
Okay.
So they're probably not going to do anything more than likely that's going to be incredibly risky. That's my gut feeling.
Leith, thank you so much. We're going to actually cut the questions out now so that those that are attending online or that are in person, if you would like to leave, you can leave. We'll be actually here with Dr. Martin for a few more minutes, so you guys, those in the room, if you have additional questions, we'll take you, we can do that. Maggie, before I go into announcing next week's events, not next week's, the upcoming event, are there anything else from the other side or anything else you need addressed on your end?
No, but just bear in mind that there is no meeting next week. It's
Right.
Thanksgiving week, so you guys can take it off.
All right, everyone, we will not see you next week. Again, we will not see you next week. Our next one will be on the 30th. It will actually be going into startup markets, your TAM, SAM, SOM, or your serviceable, addressable market. And Maggie, our very own, is actually going to give that presentation. But we're going to be going into the importance of sizing your market and identifying what part of that market you can foreseeably and feasibly capture. Leith addressed that briefly, but we'll go into a little bit more of that. And a lot of companies get that wrong. And if you get it really wrong, a lot of times it tells investors that you haven't really identified who your customer really, how feasible the concept is in the market. So that will be a good, important one to come after. So again, we'll see you on the 30th of next month. I will be sending Leith's presentation and a couple other resources on this topic to you tomorrow. And of course, if you have any questions or anything of that nature, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to fill those as we can. But thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for the online attendees. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for having us. We appreciate it. Take care.